The Desert King, Ganondorf, the great adversary of the Legend of Zelda series. Is he truly evil? He rules over a land laid covered in desert, where from ages long past dwelt the ambitions of a promising young man that he used to be. During his youth, the land known as Hyrule lived in harmony, but as time went by, that harmony was destroyed. Was this the fault of the Desert King, or did he sacrifice everything for his people's prosperity? Is Ganondorf good? My hate never perishes. It is born anew in a cycle with no end. I will rise again.
These are the last words that the Demon King, Demise, spoke before he met his end.
His hate never perishes. It will be born anew in an endless cycle. Eventually, this hatred will manifest in a tragic individual, a young Gerudo named Ganondorf.
Throughout the Zelda Chronicle, Ganondorf is typically portrayed as a stereotypical villain, but is there a method to his madness? What exactly caused Ganondorf to be the person we all know him to be? Better yet, what caused him to foster so much hatred?
To answer this question, let's discuss Ganondorf's roots for a moment. The Desert King comes from the Gerudo tribe, a desert-dwelling Amazonian-like race. Where did this tribe come from? The answer lays at the beginning of the timeline during the events of Skyward Sword, when the residents of Skyloft resettled to the surface.
During this mass migration, we can infer that a group of Skyloftians settled in the Lanaro Desert, which over time became the Gerudo Desert, complete with its own ethnic identity, culture, and even theology.
The Gerudo, like the Hyruleans, practice a matriarchal-like faith. However, the Gerudo worship this deity known as the Goddess of the Sand. This deity in question hasn't been referenced much throughout the Zelda Chronicle, or has it?
The Gerudo tribe, like the Hyruleans, both descended from Skyloft. With this knowledge, it is natural to infer that the Gerudo would borrow some culture and theology from Skyloft. And which deity is most apparent with this region? The Goddess Hylia.
Ever since the ending of Skyward Sword, Skyloft's denizens migrated to the region which would later be known as Hyrule. The Hyruleans borrowed their culture from Skyloft. The Gerudo tribe must have followed suit. In fact, if you look at the statues of both the Goddess of the Sand and the Goddess Hylia, you will see some similarities. But is there more proof to support this conclusion?
In the official Nintendo Player's Guide of Ocarina of Time, it stated that the Spirit Temple was built by the Gerudo's ancestors. Additionally, the Goddess Hylia has been alluded to be the Goddess of Time. During the course of Skyward Sword, it has been noted that she created the Gate of Time, along with manipulating time to suit her needs.
In the Spirit Temple, there are references to the concept known as time. When you first enter the temple, these two statues are seen. Both statues give information regarding time manipulation. However, the most credible pieces of information is this. This tile is a depiction of Hylia found in Skyward Sword. The way Hylia is depicted notes further similarities with the Goddess of the Sand. Additionally, there is a Triforce insignia along with the pair of wings found at the entrance of the Spirit Temple. Is this all simply coincidence?
If there is a connection, that would make sense. If the Gerudo's ancestors came from Skyloft, they would naturally inherit their culture and theology. They would bring these signs of civilization in their journey to settle in the desert. As noted by the official Ocarina of Time guide, the forerunners of the Gerudo built the Spirit Temple in honor of their deity.
And as we noted, the Goddess of the Sand has certain similarities with the Goddess Hylia. Obviously, there are differences between both depictions. However, the time frame between Skyward Sword and Ocarina of Time is potentially hundreds if not thousands of years. During this time, the interpretation of the Goddess Hylia could have been transformed by the desert culture, ultimately forming a deity that is relatable to the Gerudo tribe. In summary, at the end of Skyward Sword, Skyloftians began to settle in the land below that would later be known as Hyrule. One group settled in the plains, and the other in the desert. Each developed their own unique culture that was inspired by those of Skyloft.
This can give us an answer as to why the Hyruleans hate the Gerudo so much. But is there a much darker reason behind the unusual separation between both races? A possibility are the theological differences.
The Gerudo worship the goddess of the sand, which is a different interpretation of the goddess Hylia. The Hylians, on the other hand, worship their own interpretation of the goddess. This theological rift in parts could have added on to the already considerable separation between both peoples.
In summary, the Gerudo over time became very distinct from their Hylian counterparts. Along with having their own ethnic identity, they also have their own unique culture.
This gradual rift grew continuously throughout the ages, to the Great Skyloftian Migration, when the Kingdom of Hyrule was founded, and eventually to the era of the Era of Time. This rift between the Gerudo and the Hylians began as an environmental rift turned cultural. Eventually, it will turn into an economic separation, and then conflict.
The Gerudo reside in the desert. The region isn't exactly economically viable. As a result, the people are poor relative to the rest of Hyrule. In stark contrast, the Hylians enjoy lush green plains and an overall richer land.
And this is the environment where Ganondorf grew up in. Ganondorf was likely born sometime before the events of the Hyrulean Civil War. Ganondorf became the king of a poor region of Hyrule, watching as the other lands enjoy mysterious forests, refreshing waters, mineral wealth, or lush green plains, while the other tribes were enjoying the bounties of their respective lands. His own people were suffering in the desert heat. I like to think of Ganondorf as a manifestation of Gerudo aspirations, to seek out a better life for his people.
Now, let's lead up to the events of the Hyrulean Civil War. What happened as a result of the conflict? All of Hyrule became united under the banner of the Hyrulean Royal Family. But what led up to this? Well, let's count up all the major powers leading up to this point. The Hylians, the Gerudo, the Sheikah, the Gorons, and the Zora. After the war, the Sheikah tribe suddenly disappeared. Additionally, Kakariko village was being reconstructed after the war. Notice how the carpenters are reconstructing the village. And the Gerudo swore fealty to the king of Hyrule.
We do know that the war ended sometime around 9 years before the events of Ocarina of Time. We know this because of the hero of Time's age. During an interview with Shigeru Miyamoto, he has revealed that Link in Ocarina of Time is 9 years old as a child. Since Link, the hero of time, is born during the events of the Civil War, this means that the war ended sometime within 9 years before the events of Ocarina of Time. In other words, the Civil War occurred not too long before the events of the game.
According to the Ocarina of Time Player's Guide, Hylians did receive mineral wealth from the Death Mountain in the form of rupees. In addition, the fresh water supply of Zora's domain. In order to satisfy the national interests of the Hylians would need to have a closer access to the resources of both Death Mountain and Zora's domain. The Kakariko region was a perfect location to meet that goal. It is just a stone throws away from Zora's domain and practically neighbors Death Mountain.
However, one entity stood in their way, the Sheikah tribe. The Kakariko region was previously a Sheikah location. The Sheikah originally acted as the guardians of Hylia. However, in the course of Skyward Sword, the goddess gave up her divine form to become immortal, which is the first Zelda. In the future, Zelda's bloodline comprised the future Hyrulean Royal Family.
So the Sheikah had their tasks altered throughout the ages. Originally, they were supposed to be the guardians of Hylia, but due to Hylia's actions during Skyward Sword, the Sheikah were forced to serve the Hyrulean Royal Family.
According to Professor Shikashi, the Sheikah tribe suddenly disappeared after the Civil War. What exactly happened? Well, a dark answer lays within the Shadow Temple. Here is gathered Hyrule's bloody history of greed and hatred. The Shadow Temple is a structure built by the Sheikah, and its layout is akin to a torture prison. The boss of the temple is an entity known as Bongo Bongo, who, according to Professor Shikashi, is the man who can see the truth. However, this man was later defeated and sealed into the bottom of the well by Impa. Hold on. If Bongo Bongo is a Sheikah, and he fought against Impa, who is another Sheikah, what does that mean?
The Kingdom of Hyrule desired economic benefits of having the sovereign rule over Kakariko village, which was the home of the Sheikah. A split within the Sheikah tribe occurred, between the loyalist faction loyal to the Hylian crown led by Impa and the rebel faction led by the Amatic Bongo Bongo.
The result of which caused a conflict. Besides, a civil war by definition assumes that citizens of a similar land would fight against each other. The Sheikah rebelling against the Hylian crown would fit this scenario. The conflict drew the attention of the young king known as Ganondorf. In his perspective, as a leader of a relatively poor region, he would definitely be wary of the Hylian crown suddenly expanding its power. Naturally, he would give his support to the opposition. An alliance between both factions occurred. But unfortunately, the rebel Sheikah were continuously faltering in the conflict.
This would later give rise to the Sheikah genocide, where countless Sheikah tribesmen were butchered.
Ganondorf's initial judgment was a bit flawed. Otto von Bismarck, Iron Chancellor of Germany, once said that, in a combination of 5 players, it is always desirable to be on the side of the 3. A Gerudo Rebel Sheikah alliance simply could not stand against the combined might of 3 other already established powers.
As a result, Ganondorf, humiliated, surrendered to the Hyruleans. At the end of the war, Kakariko village was devastated, which prompted the later reconstruction of the area by carpenters. Unfortunately, the once mighty Sheikah were nearly wiped out. Their home is now Hyrulean territory, and the remaining blood history lays dormant within the Shadow Temple.
After the war, Ganondorf later swore fealty to the King of Hyrule. However, Ganondorf learned something crucial during this conflict. The Sheikah know of most, if not all, of the royal family secrets, including the location of the Triforce. This information, again, is a secret. How exactly did Ganondorf come across this knowledge? Through his previous alliance with the rebel Sheikah. Thus, Ganondorf constructed a plan to take over Hyrule, this time using the Triforce. In other words, Ganondorf's hatred towards the Hyruleans is rooted in fear. Think about it, if the Hyruleans could kill off an entire race, who's to say they won't do the same to the Gerudo? In fact, they did later on.
In the events of Ocarina of Time, Ganondorf conducted his plan to take over Hyrule, but was later thwarted by the Hero of Time. Subsequently, the hero went back in time to warn the royal family of Ganondorf's ambitions.
Ganondorf was caught off guard. The Desert King was under the impression that if he did not act against the Hyruleans, his people would suffer. He was forced to take a bold act to launch a preemptive strike against the Hyruleans before the Hyruleans could even mobilize. Thus, the Gerudo-Hyrulean War ensued. In many ways, the Gerudo-Hyrulean War is a continuation to the previous Hyrulean Civil War. Ganondorf, wary of Hyrulean hegemony, sought to take out the Hyrulean authority.
Evidence to this lies within the Temple of Time in Twilight Princess. The location is completely abandoned. Why would the very symbol of Hyrulean theology be laid to rot? In fact, some portions of the area is very reminiscent of the old castle town in Ocarina of Time. The Gerudo-Hyrulean War absolutely rocked all of Hyrule. The old castle town was sacked and destroyed, and the Hyruleans went on the defensive. However, Ganondorf's plan backfired. Ganondorf managed to rally up all other lands against them through his aggression. At the ending of the war, the Gerudo tribe faced a genocide very reminiscent of the one the Sheikah faced.
At the ending of the war, the Gerudo tribe were pushed back to the desert, where they were killed off in droves in Arbiter's grounds. Evidence to this lays within both the disappearance of the Gerudo in Twilight Princess, and the Style troops, which look strikingly similar to Hyrulean soldiers. In fact, Arbiter's grounds and the Shadow Temple are both very similar. Both are torture prisons used to execute warring factions. Rebel Sheikah were executed in the Shadow Temple after the events of the Hyrulean Civil War, while the Gerudo were massacred in Arbiter's grounds after the Gerudo-Hyrulean War.
Ganondorf was humiliated and defeated in the most extreme degree at the ending of the Gerudo-Hyrulean War. He saw his own people killed off in droves. The Arbiter's ground was nothing more than a slaughterhouse for his own people.
Just imagine it, a leader of a people hearing his own subjects being massacred in the grounds below. This would drive anyone absolutely insane. Hatred drove Ganondorf. Hatred towards the Hyruleans. This hatred blinded him. Through it all, however, the Desert King was set to be executed by the sages. However, the execution failed. Perhaps it was intense hatred spawned by the deaths of his people that brought out not only the Triforce of power, but perhaps an inner demon. Whatever the case, he survived his execution, becoming hatred incarnate. As a last-ditch effort, the sages then sealed Ganondorf away into the Twilight Realm.
There, Ganondorf regrouped his strength, determined to return to Hyrule to seek revenge for killing off his people. But he will need an army to do it. Luckily for him, an entire civilization, untouched by Hyrule, was locked away in the Twilight Realm. The Kingdom of Twilight. In order to subvert this kingdom to his will, he would need an inside man. This individual will be the Twilight known as Zant. By portraying himself as a god, he successfully manipulates Zant to do his bidding.
Thus, Ganondorf successfully executed a coup against the Twilight Crown. The only known member of the royal family went into hiding, which is the young princess by the name of Midna. At this point, Ganondorf and Zant ultimately led the Twilight. With the proper resources at his disposal, Ganondorf was determined to return to Hyrule and topple the kingdom once more for what they had done to his people.
Thus, Ganondorf returned to Hyrule, but Hyrule was a very different place this time around. The old castle town was laid to rot, and the new one took its place. And the Gerudo, his people, were nowhere to be found. The ensuing Twilight invasion was initially successful and honestly quite efficient. Ganondorf, now an experienced strategist, knew exactly how to hit the Hyruleans, which resulted in the effortless takeover of Hyrule Castle.
However, his reign was short-lived thanks to the Hero of Twilight, guided by the Hero of Time. At last, during the ending of Twilight Princess, the Desert King met his end. If I were to describe Ganondorf in one word, I would describe him as a paradox. He wields a Triforce of power, yet he rules an impoverished region. He wanted to bring a better life for the Gerudo, yet he led his people into war and genocide. Even the way he dies is mystifying. I believe Ganondorf showed his most powerful moment here in the ending of Twilight Princess. During his death, he absolutely refused to yield towards Hyruleans. He died while standing, defiant of any wounds he might have suffered. Come to think of it, perhaps Ganondorf is a victim of the times. He was born in an era that was rife in conflict, but this quote from Demise can summarize the individual known as Ganondorf. An incarnation of my hatred shall ever follow your kind, dooming them to wander a blood-soaked sea of darkness for all time. Considering the events transpiring in Hyrule at the time, I can understand why a person like Ganondorf came into being, a manifestation of Gerudo aspirations, turned into a victim of inherent hatred. Ganondorf's aspirations can be best said by the man himself in the events of Wind Waker. My country lay within a vast desert. When the sun rose into the sky, a burning wind punished my lands, searing the world. And when the moon climbed the dark of night, a frigid gale pierced our homes. No matter when it came, the wind carried the same thing, death. But the wind that blew across the green fields of Hyrule brought something other than suffering and ruin. I coveted that wind, I suppose. Is Ganondorf good? Well, he certainly had his motives, similar to how Link has his own motives to save Hyrule, or Zelda attempting to guide it. Ganondorf, originally at least, also wanted to save Hyrule, but at the expense of the Hyruleans. Are Ganondorf's motives truly malevolent? Or was it all just reactionary?
Is Ganondorf a villain, or is simply misunderstood? The story of Ganondorf is a tragic one. Will we ever learn more about the Desert King? Perhaps, but this theory attempts to tell us the tale of his tragic life. If you want to hear more about this tragedy, click here to see my part of the theory.
But is Ganondorf the subject of a much grander plan? A plan regarding the gods of old, and the mysterious purpose of the Triforce? And what about the enigmatic Sheikah? What role did they serve in the bloody pages of Hyrule's history? Well, those are theories for another day. Thank you for watching the video, I really appreciate it. If you like this video, then please like, and if you really like this video, then check out the second half of this theory over at HMK's channel. Link is right here. Till then, have a great day, and take care.